Hi, everybody, and welcome to Title II Tuesday, brought to you by the Center for Inclusive Teaching and Learning here at UWSP. Here we are in week 6 of our bite-sized efforts to remediate our course contents to comply with the digital accessibility requirements of Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I want to remind everybody that CITL has office hours in most of our academic buildings to help you through the rough patches that you might be experiencing, and you should feel free to drop in if you can. If not, remember that we have the BSRG course on Canvas to support you, and you can always schedule a consultation with CITL staff through the link on our website. So far, those of you who are keeping up with us are doing great. For those of you who have a lot of digital content and are putting this off, I want to warn you that you could be making it harder on yourself in the long run. It's never too late to get started. Enroll in the Digital Accessibility 101 and BSRG courses on Canvas and start working to make your course fully accessible. This week, we'll be tackling tables in our Canvas pages, assignments, discussions, and quizzes. For the visually oriented, tables are easy to use and make sense of. We can scan a table quickly, associate the data in any cell to information provided about columns and rows. In other words, we can see the context of the data. However, for those with low or no vision, tables can pose accessibility issues when their complex structure isn't rendered in specific ways because the visual context that sighted folks take for granted isn't available. Screen readers rely on semantic markup provided by HTML table tags to understand the relationships between cells. Without proper tags that link header cells to data cells, the screen reader can't provide context, making the table's data meaningless. Before anybody freaks out, let's be clear that you don't need to learn HTML to work with tables, but you do need to review your tables to make sure that they're compliant. Here are the guidelines we need to meet for compliance. First, tables should always be used for tabular data, not other forms of formatting like pre-formatted styles, tabs, and not images or screenshots. Second, the cells in the table should not be left blank, except for the top left cell when both the first column and first row are headers. Use NA, a dash, or a zero instead. Third, tables should always have header rows and/or header columns that are formatted and tagged as such in the HTML, not just larger bold text or colored backgrounds. Fourth, each table should have a descriptive caption identifying what the table is and what it contains. Think of this as the table title. Fifth, tables should be as simple as possible. Avoid merged cells. And finally, tables should be used only for tabular data, not for page structure or the visual organization of a page. When used for visual organization, tables make it difficult for those using screen readers to locate that information. Now let's move on to checking our tables for compliance. Because there are many different facets to compliance, this is going to take us a little bit longer to show you than usual. Sean will tell you to start your work in the You Do It accessibility checker. Unfortunately, our accessibility checkers can't catch all of the errors associated with tables, especially when images or screenshots of tables are used, or when there are empty cells, or when tables are used for page structure and organization rather than for presenting data. This is because the checkers can't read and understand table contents, and they can't identify an image as a table. Sometimes you'll have to make choices for how to best remediate. Fortunately, most instructors have limited use for tables in their courses. So for tables, I think the best place to start is by accessing the rich content editor for every page, discussion, quiz question, and assignment that you've added a table to, and leave the You Do It scan for last. It's up to you, of course, but I'm going to show it to you my way. In my Accessibility Sandbox course, I put a bunch of table issues on a single page to make this easier, but if you've got multiple objects in Canvas that have tables, you've probably got a little bit more work to do. Here, I access my way messed up page and enter the rich content editor. First, I want to identify whether the tables I have are all tables, not images or made with styles formatting, which we'll cover later. If a table is formatted as a table, the table editing interface pops up when you click on it. But if it's an image, you'll get the Image Options interface. If you've used a screenshot, a PNG, or a JPEG rather than a table, as I have here, you'll have to manually re-enter the data into a table to make it accessible. There's no shortcut for this. I'm not going to do that here because it would take too much time, but take note that this is what you need to do. Once you know that you're working with tables, take a peek at the little accessibility symbol beneath the text entry window. This is the Canvas Accessibility Checker. And if there's a blue circled number by it, that means that there are some accessibility issues on your Canvas page. I've got 12, and most of them are related to my messed up tables. If you click on this little symbol, you'll get a pop-up for remediation, from which you can take care of most of the common issues. For each issue, the area of concern in the text entry interface will be surrounded by a darker box. First, we see that I don't have a caption on my first table. Remember, that's the title of the table. It should describe what the table is or what it shows. You can add one in the box here and click Apply. Voila, fixed. Go on to the next issue. Here we see that I haven't set headers for the table. No header columns or rows, even though I've used color on top. Figure out which is the most appropriate from the drop-down menu. In this case, I should have the first column and first row marked as headers because understanding the data in each cell relies on knowing both row and column. So I'll select both. They are instantly bolded to make it easier for sighted folks, and now they are formatted appropriately for those using screen readers. We have turned garbage into gold. Click Apply and move on. No caption? Easy peasy. The next error is associated with header labeling. For some reason, the scope of the header has not been identified. This error is most likely to occur if you've used a table within a table or merged cells, such that a single header applies to multiple rows or columns. If you get this error, you just need to specify what the header applies to. This is a simple table, so name labels a single column, and that's what I'll choose. And this error is throughout the table, so I'll correct it everywhere. Remember to click Apply or it doesn't count. Next, I'm lacking another caption, but I can see that the table is empty. What's the problem here? Is it that the table is empty? Did I forget to add something? Or did I make a table I didn't need? This makes a difference for what you correct to remediate the accessibility. In this case, I started to add a table that I later didn't need, so I'll just delete the table. Now the caption issue is moot, so I'll hit the next button. My next error is also that I'm missing a table caption. Let's figure out which table this error is pointing to. This is one that I've used to place stuff into 3 columns on the page. But that's not what tables are for. This is an example of using a table for page formatting and structure rather than for tabular data. It's just for sighted folks to have a pretty arrangement of other stuff. Okay, this isn't really pretty, but whatever. There are 2 possible ways to remediate a structural table. If adding headers would clarify the nature of the contents in the cell, you can add a row or column to the table with text headers and format it as a header row or column. In this case, though, there's no coherent logic to the cell contents. I made the table just to locate different items on the page. So I need to move all of this stuff out of the table. Random text and links don't belong in tables. I can do that in the text entry interface and delete the table. In most cases, it's easier for screen readers to navigate a heading followed by a list than it is to navigate a table. When I'm finished, I'll review the page to make sure everything looks okay. I still have the photo of a table that I should remediate, and I notice here that there's an empty cell in my first table. I'll enter the right data there, and then I see that there's a thing that looks like a table but isn't really. Note when I highlight on it, Canvas shows me that the style of the text is pre-formatted. This is something we'll need to correct. In You Do It, it will show up as an error of using styles instead of tabular format, but you can't correct it in You Fix It, so we have to do it in the Rich Content Editor. I'll fix that and save the page. Now that I've done a first pass through my course correcting all the major errors in the tables that I remember adding, I'll move on to You Do It. This is great for detecting errors in the tables you've forgotten about. This tool will detect problems in questions in classic quizzes, but not new quizzes. Yet another reason to use classic quizzes. You will have to manually check all of your new quiz questions. Quick aside here, classic quizzes are also better than new quizzes for working with question banks that you can access from multiple courses. So, in You Do It, you can hit the scan button, or if there are issues with that, you can choose the complete rescan from the menu under the kebab. Then, enter the You Fix It tab and set your filters for active issues. Scroll through the issues to see if any errors are related to tables. The one that you're likely to miss, unless you're careful, is the one that begins "styles may be used for tabular data." You can see that I still have a couple of table errors in spite of my previous remediation. The first of these is like the non-table table we saw before. It was made with pre-formatted styles rather than a table. It can't be remediated in You Fix It, so you need to access the Canvas item in which these appear and reconstruct the data as a table. If the table editing feature is not in your ribbon, click on the kebab to reveal the entire ribbon. Select the size of the table and enter the information. Notice as I do this that more errors appear in the Canvas accessibility checker below the entry interface. These are related to headings. There are tools in the Rich Content Editor that you can use to make your table pretty if you want to use them. I don't. You can also use this to adjust the properties of cells, rows, and columns, including labeling them as header rows and columns. Since we know how to fix this stuff now, let's go back to You Fix It and look at our next error. This is that a table doesn't include header rows or columns. Note that this table is too large to appear in the You Fix It preview, but to fix it, we have to go to the Canvas page anyway, so we'll do that. Now, this table, which was graciously provided by Katie Sartini in Wildlife, shows some of the accessibility issues we face when dealing with nested tables, or tables with merged cells. For accessibility, we want our tables to be as simple as possible. This table lacks header rows and columns. Those are relatively easy to fix at first and may clear up the problems shown in the accessibility checker. But because of the nesting, we don't just have headings, we have subheadings. We need to format anything that is a subheading as a heading. So there are nested heading columns and nested heading rows, and for each of these, we have to indicate the scope of what the heading covers. The top row of headings is easy, but it gets hairy quickly. There are 4 sections in the first column. Each applies to a group of rows that covers 4 weeks. But then in the weeks column, the number of weeks applies to a subset of the total number of rows applying to just the week. Within each week, there's a title showing the dates and general topic. Then there are headers for the rows that indicate the nature of the material in the following cell. You can label a table like this to make it technically accessible to a screen reader. However, from the perspective of a screen reader user, this is a nightmare. This is a table that makes visual sense, but for those lacking vision, it would be much easier to navigate and would facilitate the ability of the user to locate information without having to read through the entire table every time if you would provide the information under specific headers in an outline format. In this case, the section would be header level 2, the week with the title would be header level 3, and specific contents of the week could be bulleted beneath the weekly header. Remediating tables can be easy or complex. Remember, tables function not just for presenting information, but for finding specific information. Formatting tables so they are simple and accessible is the first step to making them useful to all students. Replacing tables with more accessible formats for information delivery is the second. And that's this week's Title II tip, brought to you by the Center for Inclusive Teaching and Learning here at UWSP. Remember, at CITL, we offer support for course design, learning activities, assessment, pedagogy, and accessibility. Visit our website to schedule a consultation today.